Hey there, lovely teachers. Today we're talking about the best sight reading resources I've found. I'm going to go through some of my favourite books and other resources for improving sight reading skills. But before I get there, I want to start with the foundation, and that is an intervallic approach to reading. So, focusing on intervals means focusing on the patterns in music rather than fussing over individual note names. Sometimes teachers do this, sometimes students do this. I found a lot of adult students tend towards focusing on the note names and being obsessive over the fact that they need to name notes instantly. But that's not how we read. Those of us who read music well do so by reading patterns. Yes, if you stop us and give us a millisecond to think, sure, we can name what note we're on. But that's not really the point. We're not thinking D, G, B, A, whatever. We're thinking about the patterns. And the foundation of those patterns is intervals. Later on, we start to recognize bigger patterns, like even, root, fifth, root as a pattern. Or bigger beyond that, certain patterns of breaking up a chord and different things like that recur again and again. But if we start with the intervals, we build towards that. And if we start by being overly focused on note names, we don't build that direction, and we need to develop that by osmosis. That's how most of us who grew up with a focus on note names ended up learning to read. It was a slower process than it needed to be, in my opinion, and eventually we came to recognize patterns and read that way anyway. So we start from there. Intervals first, note names are secondary to that. Still important, but not as important. And if we have those foundations, and that's how we're learning, then we can use sight reading resources to make sure we continue to develop those skills and get better and better and better. The first sight reading resource I want to mention is Piano Safari reading cards, or Piano Safari sight reading cards they call them, but in my studio I just call them reading cards because the word sight reading comes with some baggage for some people, so I just set that aside. I call them reading cards, and they go from A all the way to R, I believe, and that takes you from pre-reading level. So A is on the black keys, B is on the white keys, still pre-reading, and then C is the first one that's on the staff. In the first several levels, up to level F entirely, but then even a little bit beyond that on some cards, they are one hand at a time. So there's a treble clef and a bass clef stave, and they're separate, they're not a grand staff. And then later on it moves to the grand staff. These reading cards are special because they're not just sight reading exercises like you'll find in a book. They are a line for the left and a line for the right, or a line for both together, and then a line of rhythm across the bottom, which is a great addition and really makes them very valuable. They can be a super way to just spend a few minutes on sight reading in every lesson or every practice session and make sure you're really getting things done. In my studio, we use the reading cards pretty much exclusively in lessons. That's not how Piano Safari designed them, but that's how it fits for our studio. So we don't assign them for home practice. I found when we did, they weren't getting practiced anyway. Maybe just me. But we like to use them as just sight reading in lessons. And that way students aren't practicing them, so they really truly are sight reading, and we get to see how that's progressing as a skill. My favorite way to do the reading cards is to have students sing the line first. I give them the starting note in solfa, so I tell them, it starts on do. Can you sing it with me in solfa, or can you sing it alone in solfa? It depends on the student. And then I have them play them. I find that singing them first, they get to think about the pitches and think about what's going on with the rhythm as a sort of warm-up, and then they read through it while playing and feel less concerned about making mistakes, in my experience, and it also just helps develop their ear and their overall sight singing skills, and I think that's a wonderful thing to have. So we do that for the left and the right, or for the left and the right, and then play them together if it's a together exercise, and then we count and tap the rhythm that's at the bottom of the card, and then that's it. We move along. I try to do 2 in every lesson. I'm not going to say I always achieve that goal, but that is our goal here, is to do 2 in every single lesson until students are past the stage of the reading cards. The next resource is somewhat oldie, I guess, because I used it myself, but a goodie, and that is Improve Your Sight Reading by Paul Harris. The copy I have here even still has the sticker on the front. It's actually my own copy from when I was doing my grade 7 exam. So it's the grade 7 level, which is a very serious grey colour. And grade 8 is black. Just to show you how intense it's getting. Anyway, on my copy I still have the price sticker on the front, which is cheaper than it would be now, but also has the name of the shop, which has been closed down for a long time in Dublin. So anyway, I leave the sticker on there to remind me of the shop Opus 2 and how much I used to love going in there, but it is a great progressive series. It tends towards a little bit more challenging, I would say, which I think can be good. It's basically aligned with the ABRSM or Associated Board exams, and they are a little bit trickier in their leveling sometimes than other exam boards. So I think that's good, honestly, if a student is preparing for an exam or something like that, because if they do the grade 3 exercises from Improve Your Sight Reading and then they go into their exam with a different exam board, it's going to feel easier for them. I think that's a good thing. These books have great little tips, ideas, and they do progress through the book to help you improve. And overall, they're just great, very diverse in terms of the music that's provided, but all short little sight reading exercises that improve skills over time. If students are dedicated to improving their sight reading skills and they really sit and do one of these every single day, prepare for it, play it once, see what they could do better, play it again. That takes about, let's say, 5 minutes. If they do that every day, I have seen their sight reading skills absolutely skyrocket. They can be improved so much, but it does take dedication to sit and do that every day. Sight reading isn't always considered the most fun thing to do. The next resource and the final one that's dedicated to sight reading is Piano Adventures Sight Reading. So these are supplemental books that go along with the main Piano Adventures series, but I've used them for students who are not using that series. They're pretty unique. So they take a piece, they are inspired by a particular piece in the main series, and they take that and do 5 variations of it for 5 days of practice in the week, and then you moved on to a different piece with its variations for the next 5 days. So again, if students stick with that, it's a great way for them to improve their sight reading. And if students are even self-studying, they've had lessons before, or they're not doing sight reading particularly with their teacher, but they want something to add by themselves to do at home, I think this is a great one to do because it's very step by step, walk you through it, get a little bit harder as you go through the levels. I will mention too for teachers that all of these include a repeat sign, which can just be nice as a evidence, I guess, that they really do have to be repeated. As I said with sight reading exercises, I consider them done when students have done the exercise twice, played it twice. So play it once, think about it, play it again, because you learn a lot from that second playing, and then I think you're done with it. The repeat mark being right there on the page every single time can be helpful. So those are 3 dedicated sight reading resources, and there are others out there, and I'm sure they're fabulous too. However, we're not done. Sight reading can be improved in many ways, and the dedicated sight reading books can be helpful to give us structure, give us a format to follow, and especially for a dedicated student, give them a step-by-step short exercise that they can do every day. And I think that's awesome. However, it's not for everyone, and there's a greater way that you can improve your sight reading skills. It's called improving your reading skills. Sight reading is just reading. It's just reading something for the first time and doing your best to make it sound like you already knew how it would go. That's a very loose definition of sight reading, but that's basically what we're trying to do. What we need to develop great reading skills, and therefore great sight reading skills, is enough repertoire. Just enough stuff. That can be any pieces. I'd say as a general rule, if our goal is sight reading or quick study pieces, I often call them 1-week pieces in my studio, the level should be 2 or 3 levels below the student's current pieces. However, if they have not done much in terms of quick study pieces, maybe they've been on an exam express and just doing 3 pieces a year for many years, you will need to go a lot lower. What we're looking for is a level of piece that student can almost play well on the first try. Not quite, Like they might miss something or not feel like they got every detail, but they got most of it. Okay? So for some students, that's going to mean going down way lower than their current level. Not just 2 or 3, but a lot lower. And I think that is fine. And I think if we do it with the right attitude, it doesn't have to feel like we're putting them back at the beginning. We're still going to let them learn their hard rep and continue progressing in that area. But we have to bring those two things back closer together. So we need to do more repertoire that is much easier, that they can play pretty much on the first try. So there are two ways to work on these pieces. There is sight reading, as in we read through it in the lesson, or they do it at home and they never play it again, or they play it once more and they're done. And then there are the quick study or 1 week pieces, which I choose a book that is at the right level for this type of piece for them, and we do one piece every week. We go through it quickly at the lesson, then they spend the week hopefully practicing it, they come back, they have to give it their best shot, and then no matter what, we are done with it. So they know they're going to be held accountable to play it again at the next lesson. If they choose to not practice it at all and to just make a big hames of it at the next lesson, that's their choice. They know I'm still going to hold them to doing the next one again and continue on that pattern. This can be a good compromise for those students who really only want to do hard stuff. They just want to do pieces that take them months and months and months, and that's what's enjoyable to them. And I don't want to dampen that at all. If that's enjoyable, great. Whatever type of music is enjoyable for you, that's great to me. But if we want to continue improving those reading skills, we can just spend a few minutes at each lesson doing something like this and really improve those reading skills over time. So I'm not going to give you examples of specific books. It could be anything that is on your shelf. I tend to make it something that I just lend to the student. So I will give them a book that we're going to do as 1 week pieces. And there's 30 pieces in the book. After 30 weeks, I just take it back and give them the next one. Or maybe even do 2 each week. And so we're done in 15 weeks. That's just an example. We're trying to just fly through these pieces no matter what. And if it's just sight reading, we're just going to do it in the lesson. Maybe play things once or twice. And then that's it. Then you can just pick things off your shelf, put them in front of the student, and then put them away again. I like to get through particular books so that I can kind of keep track of what I've done with that student so that they are genuinely sight reading, so I don't end up repeating things. So I put a little sticky tab in the book to save our place for next time, and we continue from there, do a couple more pieces at the next lesson, and keep going like that. This video is sponsored by Vibrant Music Teaching. Teaching music doesn't have to feel overwhelming. VibrantMusicTeaching.com gives you the resources and support you need to stay inspired. With interactive games, structured courses, and practical tools, you'll keep students engaged while building your own confidence. Join a global network of passionate teachers and start teaching with ease. Visit VibrantMusicTeaching.com and take your lessons to the next level. Now, as I said, sight reading is really just about developing great reading skills. The other side to it, the extra layer that's going to make you a great sight reader, is to be able to think on your feet, to play on the spot, to look ahead. And the only way to develop that skill is to be forced to do it. Some students will naturally do it. They'll naturally look ahead in their pieces. They'll naturally want to just keep going, even if they play a wrong note. Like, they'll understand that, not just intellectually, but physically in the moment. They'll be able to get that feeling of, we just keep going. But some students do not have that, and they cannot resist, no matter how many times we tell them, going back and fixing a wrong pitch, or sometimes a wrong rhythm. If we have one of those students, there are 2 answers: backing tracks and duets. I'm not going to make my students sight read with a metronome. I'm sorry, that just does not sound fun. But duets and backing tracks can have the same effect of, we keep going no matter what, because we're trying to simulate that environment where I think many teachers and musicians I talk to really developed great reading skills, and that is playing in a group. Most great sight readers I know, they got that way by playing in a group of some sort. They played in church, they played as part of a band, they were an accompanist, they did something like that, and that's where they learned to think on their feet. They developed that part of their brain that just thinks ahead and comes up with a solution, and it's good enough, and we just keep going, right? Sure, we're trying to get the notes right, but approximately. That's really what we need to be able to do, and it's harder than it sounds. Play duets with your student. You can use any duet books you have on hand, like Famous and Fun series or Grand Duets for Piano or anything. They can be multi-level or teacher-student level, really whatever you have. But the main thing you have to commit to is that you are the train that keeps moving. That's a phrase I use. We're going to go from this train station. Once we start, that's it. I'm not stopping the train until we get to the next station, which is the end of the piece. So if you fall off the train, you need to hop back on, right? If you need to just watch me for a bit and find your place in the music and come back in, that's great. If you totally lose your place and you just played the last chord with me, that's also great. Once you've said that, you have to commit to it. You have to just keep going. That's the solution, okay? It's hard. It's especially hard if your student is struggling a bit. Now, we want to make sure those duets that we're sight reading are at an easy enough level for them, but you might be surprised. You might think there's no way they would have trouble with this. Like, they're a great pianist and this is a beginner book. And still, the very fact that they're not allowed to prepare for it can be stressful at first. But we just have to go through it. There's no way around it. We have to go through. We have to keep the mood light and also be that train that just keeps moving and isn't going to fix things for them. Because we have another mode of playing duets, right? I'm sure you have it too. It's my concert mode of playing duets, and it's my beginner lesson mode of playing duets, where I just want to make the student look good, right? So I'm going to use my reading skills and my ability to think on my feet to fill things in when they go back and forth and to follow where they are, even if the rhythm is wrong. And that is what we should do in a concert. We don't want it to be obvious that they've made a mistake and we want to help them handle that. But in a sight reading session, no. Another duet book that's particularly excellent for this is one of our own resources. This is called Astronaut Buffet, and it has primo parts and secundo parts. It's a very strange, unique book. It's like a flip over book. So the secundo parts are on the back of the book, the primo parts are on the front. If you ever had a book that worked like that as a kid, you'll know what I'm talking about. But the primo parts are entirely seconds and thirds, and the secundo parts are entirely fourths and fifths. And you can mix and match any one of those secundos with those primos. So it's a really fun book to play around with, and it's great for developing reading skills as well. I love to use it with two students together as well. So duets, ensembles, backing tracks, anything you can do that gives students a reason why they have to keep going. They have no choice. The train is still moving. One final note on sight reading, and that is that you may sometimes encounter a student that is resistant to doing any kind of sight reading or even any kind of reading. What do? Well, first we have to understand why. And there's normally two possibilities. Number one is you've made it too hard. And that really is the most likely in most cases. They don't want to do it because we've made it too difficult. We haven't given them the skills. We haven't taught them the theory. We haven't prepared them in various ways to approach this piece. The level at which it is too hard, considered too hard, is different for different students. So we have to find the right level for them. And for them, it might be only a tiny, tiny bit of difficulty that makes them throw up their hands and want to give up. Or it may be that they can handle quite a lot because they're a very gritty kind of student. But we have to find the right level for them, and we have to make sure we develop the skills so that it isn't too hard. The other reason is, and this is most common with teenagers or adult students, but it could happen with kids too, they just don't see the value in reading. They're not on board with your mission. You've decided they have to read. They have not. You're not going to win that game. I'm sorry, you're not. Unless you address the underlying issue, which is they don't want to learn music reading, you're not going to be able to solve this with another great sight reading book. Because if they don't want to read, they're not going to read. You can't make them. And especially with a teenager or an adult, you can't make them. So understand why. And be open to the fact that maybe they really legitimately don't want to read, and that is appropriate to their goals. Because they just, whatever, they just want to play in a band, they just want to do XYZ. And they really don't want to read. In most cases, If they don't want to read, it's because they think that it's hard. So go back to point number 1. And they have some perception about that, and maybe it's baked in from a previous teacher they had or an idea they have about music reading that has made them think that it is a hard thing to do and it has to be difficult and boring, and that it's easier to learn from YouTube or just play chords or whatever. But if they really don't see the value in it and they have understood why you think reading is important, and you've had that conversation, you can't make them do it. I'm sorry, but you can't. Just because you love reading doesn't mean they have to. Assuming your student is on board with the whole reading mission, I hope these resources will help you. You've got a few specific sight reading resources, but also just these core elements of teaching reading skills, intervallic reading skills, some note name recognition, the skills that they actually need to be successful, and then doing enough reading enough stuff, playing enough pieces together, and especially playing with other people as much as possible so that they get a chance to develop those skills.